okay? A young person today, let's say somebody in their 20s, has about 2 billion seconds left in their life, right? Kind of 60 years, give or take, based on life expectancy. They usually, until they start to understand this concept, think of wealth in dollar terms. But dollars are being devalued. And so, $1 million doesn't get you what it used to get, right? It's kind of an old adage. And so what you're doing is you're pursuing something that ends up losing value.
네, 안녕하세요 여러분. 메이저쉬프트입니다. 요새 제가 비트코인의 비중을 많이 늘려가고 있는데요. 원래는 제 포폴에서 5% 정도의 비중만을 유지하고 있었는데 요새 계속 이런 생각이 머리에서 지워지지가 않더라고요. 작년부터 전 세계의 모든 정부들은 어마어마한 돈을 풀고 있고 특히 미국에서 연준은 역대급으로 달러를 풀었고 또 지금 준비 중인 바이든 플랜으로 1.9 트릴리언 달러라는 돈이 더 풀리게 될 거고 그 후 앞으로도 계속 세계의 정부는 기회가 되면 언제든지 무제한으로 돈을 풀게 될 거고 그렇게 돈의 가치는 계속 하락을 할 거고 물론 돈이 풀리는 만큼 주식의 가격이 상승하고 늘어나는 계좌의 밸런스를 보는 건 싫지는 않은데요. 주식의 가치를 매기는 것은 어차피 현재 계속 평가절하되고 있는 돈, 달러잖아요. 10년 후 주식이 1000%, 10배 상승한다 해도 이 돈이 실제로 지금에 비해 10배의 가치를 보존하는 건 아니잖아요. 지금 1억이 10년 후에는 몇 천만 원 정도의 가치밖에 안 되겠죠. 서울 아파트 평균 매매가가 10년 전에는 5억 정도가 안 됐던 것 같은데 현재는 10억이 훌쩍 넘어버렸듯이 지금 돈의 가치는 매초 매순간 계속 떨어지고 있는데 과연 달러로 의해 가치가 매겨지고 있는 자산들, 주식 또는 부동산만을 가지고 있는 게 과연 현명한가라는 생각이 듭니다. 그래서 저는 비트코인을 해지의 목적보다는 조금 더 적극적인 방향으로 보기를 시작했는데요. 지금 물론 우리가 비트코인을 얘기할 때 비트코인 하나에 57,000불이다, 6만 불이다 이야기를 하지만 달러의 가치가 많이 떨어진다면 달러로 비트코인을 말하는 게 아무런 의미가 없어질 수도 있다는 생각이 듭니다. 비트코인 10,000불어치, 20,000불어치가 아니라 그냥 비트코인 1개, 0.5개, 0.3개, 0.001개 이런 식으로요. 그래서 오늘 준비한 영상은 비트코인에 대한 영상이고요. 앤토니 펌플리아노의 인터뷰를 준비해봤는데요. 앤토니는 돈은 곧 시간이다. 사람들은 시간을 써서 돈을 벌고 그 돈으로 다시 시간을 사는데 지불을 한다고 합니다. 하지만 애석하게도 그 돈의 가치는 계속 떨어지고 있죠. 영상 보시고 깊은 생각 한 번쯤 해보시는 것도 나쁘지 않을 것 같다는 생각이 듭니다.
What is money? Money is time, ultimately, right? The pursuit of the acquisition of money, right? Of whether it's a currency or true money is because that should give you more time. And so one of my favorite movies ever is, and it's funny because Justin Timberlake is in it, is this movie In Time.
You lost me.
I lose most people at that part.
Okay. In Time?
In Time. And basically the premise of the movie is that everyone has a clock that's embedded into their arm. And so if you go to work, you basically put your arm underneath when you leave, and there's time that's deposited into your clock. And if your clock ever hits all zeros, you're dead. You die on the spot. And so there's a number of scenes where people are basically running, to get to you. And I give you a little bit more time so that you can get to work on Monday. And then you work to acquire time. And so basically time becomes this currency. But what becomes very fascinating about it is there are sections in society where literally there's physical places. If you only have, let's say, 72 hours or less, you're allowed to go to section 1. Section 5, though, is because you have years and years and years on your clock. And in this movie, everyone at the age of 25 freezes from a biological aging standpoint. So everyone stays the same, but you may have lived for 1,000 years. And so what becomes so fascinating about it is that rich people have time, poor people do not have time. And so in it, Justin Timberlake, the main character, at one point essentially acquires a bunch of time. And he's able to go to one of the higher levels. And now he's attending all of these galas and, poker nights and all this stuff. And one of the first things that he learns is that in the lower end of society, everyone is running everywhere at all times in the movie because time is so finite and it is so scarce. And so therefore, why would I walk down the street? I must run down the street. In the highest level of society, no one runs anywhere. And in fact, if you run, you are seen as lower class.
Yeah.
Because wealth is time. And so that movie is, it's got a ton of kind of things that you can pull out of it, but to me is the perfect epitome of money is time. And so when you start to think about the acquisition of money, right, it goes to this whole idea of time billionaire. If you think of 1,000,000 seconds, it's about 11 days. 1,000,000,000 seconds is 31 years. And so if I said to somebody, you have to switch lives with Warren Buffett, would you do it? Some people would say, sure. That'd be their initial reaction. I said, but you gotta have to be, 92 years old. Is the money worth the lack of time? Most people would say no, right? And there's this guy, Graham Duncan, who really articulated this well. And ultimately what ends up happening is you realize time is more valuable than the money. But you acquire the money to gain more time.
And the reason it's valuable is because of the scarcity of time. And in that sense, the scarcity there gives value to time. It's fascinating to think about all the thought experiments here of if that could actually be on the economy, if you can actually convert time in a frictionless way to money.
Well, and if you start to pull on this a little bit and say, okay, a young person today, let's say somebody in their 20s, has about 2 billion seconds left in their life, right? Kind of 60 years, give or take, based on life expectancy. They usually, until they start to understand this concept, think of wealth in dollar terms. But dollars are being devalued. And so, $1 million doesn't get you what it used to get, right? It's kind of an old adage. And so what you're doing is you're pursuing something that ends up losing value. And so it's the constant rat race. It's how do I constantly try to get more? How do I get more dollars? How do I get more dollars? Because even if I say to myself, I'm going to retire when I get $100,000. When I get the $100,000, the $100,000 5 years from now doesn't buy me what I thought it did. So now I need 500,000 or 200,000 or 1,000,000 or whatever the number is. And so ultimately what ends up occurring is that the Bitcoin community and many people in kind of this idea of sound money is you want to be able to acquire an asset that not only will hold the value, right, the store of value over time, but it will actually appreciate over time. And so when you look at something like Bitcoin against the dollar, against other types of assets, all of these assets are down compared to Bitcoin, right? Now, some of that's just in the early days of kind of the pricing of an asset. You go from very small to something much larger. But now what you start to look at is, well, if you have a finite supply of something, what ends up happening is people begin to value it more. And so in a world where dollars are infinite and other fiat currencies are infinite, Bitcoin becomes very, very interesting, very special, and something that is very aspirational. And so I think that's where you're starting to see people say, wait a second, this is something where that finite, secure store of value is essential to wealth generation and preservation over a long period of time.